you ever felt like you're the only one stuck in time, in a place that's slowly suffocating you? Millbrook had always been quiet, almost too quiet. But that night, something felt off. The air was thick, charged, as if the town itself was holding its breath. I was just standing there at the train station waiting for nothing when I heard it, the whistle. Distant at first, but unmistakable. Everyone had heard the stories about the train that passed through town long after midnight. They called it the last train, a train that no one was ever meant to see. But there I was, watching it approach, its headlights glowing crimson in the mist, casting shadows that didn't belong. And then, just before it arrived, I saw something else, something on the tracks. What I thought I was witnessing couldn't possibly be real, but it was. And that was just the beginning. Keep watching, because the last train isn't done yet. But before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. And if you want even more, stay connected with us on our social media platforms for more creepy content. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now let's dive into the darkness together. It's funny how you can live in a place your whole life and still find yourself feeling like a stranger in it. Millbrook, the small town I've called home for 27 years, was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. People passed through, mostly travelers on their way somewhere else. But as the days blurred into each other, I started to feel the weight of the quiet. It wasn't the good kind of quiet either. It was oppressive. The kind that makes you wonder if the world's just forgotten you. That night was like any other. The scent of rain still hung in the air, the sky just dark enough to make the street lamps glow eerily. But something about the air felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was an electricity, a tension that wasn't there before. Maybe it was just the boredom getting to me. Whatever it was, I found myself at the train station, standing on the platform just past midnight. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in town had. The old-timers would speak of a train, the last train, that passed through Millbrook late at night. Red headlights, they said, like blood in the fog. It was an old tale, passed down from one generation to the next. Some said it was a ghost train, some said it was cursed, and others swore it was simply the result of too much moonshine. But there was always a chill in the air when they talked about it. And yet, for reasons I still don't understand, I couldn't shake the urge to see it for myself. The sound of a train whistle broke through my thoughts, a long, low note that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I glanced toward the woods beyond the tracks, where the mist had begun to settle. It was so thick, I could barely see beyond the platform. The train's lights cut through the fog like twin daggers of crimson. I froze. There it was. The train was coming. I had been prepared for something strange, but this was different. The train wasn't just old. It looked as though it had been pulled straight from some twisted nightmare. The red headlights glowed, but it wasn't just the color that made it feel wrong. It was the way they seemed to burn, like they were too bright, too unnatural. The train slowed as it approached the station, the screech of its brakes slicing through the air. But there was something eerie about it. It was almost too quiet. The rumble of the engine wasn't there. It was like the train had no sound of its own, just the occasional hiss of steam from the engine. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Something pulled me forward, some dark curiosity I couldn't explain. As I reached the edge of the platform, I saw something else, something that made the blood freeze in my veins. A figure stood on the tracks. At first, I thought it was a trick of the mist, a shadow or a distortion. But no. It was a person, standing dead center in the path of the train. Their skin was pale, almost sickly white, and their eyes, God, their eyes. They glowed, bright, unnaturally bright, like two orbs of light in the dark. They wore a tattered white shirt that billowed in the wind, the fabric torn at the edges, and dark pants that were filthy, like they'd been dragging through the dirt for weeks. I couldn't breathe. I should have turned around. I should have walked away, back into the safety of my house. But I couldn't. My legs moved on their own, pulling me closer to the figure. My eyes stayed locked on that pale face, the glowing eyes that seemed to reach into my soul. And then, just as the train's headlights seemed to blaze, the figure started moving. Not running. No, they didn't run. They glided. The way they moved was unnatural. Their limbs jerked in ways that didn't make sense, and yet they got closer with terrifying speed. I could hear the train's horn now, loud and urgent, blaring in warning. But still, the figure didn't stop. It didn't even flinch as the train barreled toward it. For a moment I thought I might scream, but the train's headlights flashed, and in that instant, I saw something. Them. For what they truly were. Their face was no longer just pale. It was twisted, almost grotesque. The features were wrong. The skin seemed stretched, like a mask of something that wasn't human. The train kept coming, and I thought, this is it. This is where it ends. But instead of being crushed, the figure vanished. It wasn't an illusion, a trick of the fog. It simply disappeared. I stood there, frozen, staring at the tracks. The train was upon me now, but it passed right through the space where the figure had been. There was no scream, no crash, nothing. It was as if the figure had never existed. The train didn't even slow down. It just moved through the mist, its red lights cutting through the darkness like a malevolent force. I don't know how long I stood there, my heart racing, my body numb with disbelief. I could feel my hands shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. The train didn't stop. It didn't even look like it had noticed the figure. It just kept going, fading into the fog as quickly as it had appeared. But then, a hand gripped my shoulder. I spun around, my heart in my throat. A man stood behind me, tall and thin, with a dark hat that obscured most of his face. The fog seemed to cling to him, swirling around his feet like a shadow that followed him wherever he went. His eyes were hidden, but I could feel them, like a pressure on my chest. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice deep and rough, like it hadn't been used in years. "Who are you?" I whispered, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the tracks, where the mist had thickened even further. "It's not safe here, not at this hour. You saw it, didn't you? The train." I nodded, my throat dry. He shook his head. "You should never have seen it. It's cursed. It takes anyone who dares to follow it. It doesn't stop for anyone. Not for you. Not for me. And not for the ones who stand on the tracks, waiting to be taken." I tried to speak, but my words caught in my throat. I felt like I was drowning in the fear, in the horror of what I had witnessed. The man took a step closer, his face still hidden beneath his hat. "You're marked now," he said, almost as if to himself. "It'll come for you, just like it came for me." Before I could react, he turned, walking away into the fog, disappearing as if he were never there. I was left alone, the cold night pressing in on me from all sides. I wanted to run, to leave this place behind and never look back. But I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the tracks. And then I heard it again, the train's whistle in the distance. Faint at first, but growing louder. It was coming back. And this time, I knew it wouldn't be satisfied with just watching. I was part of the story now, and the last train wasn't done with me. Not yet. It was the beginning of summer when I reluctantly found myself back in my hometown, something I usually avoided during the warmer months. Normally, I would escape to my college town or travel around Europe. But this time I couldn't escape. My plans had changed, and there I was, stuck in my childhood town for the week. I told myself that it was only for a few days, and then I'd be on a plane to Germany. I tried to distract myself by revisiting old hobbies. I hiked, watched movies, drove aimlessly around the town, trying to fill the void. But after a few days, I started to feel restless. I wasn't excited to see any old friends, nor was I particularly eager to be home. So, when I found myself growing bored of the usual activities, I decided to take a trip down memory lane. Back in the day, my friends and I had a bad habit: train hopping. It was something I hadn't done in years, but I figured, why not? It was my last day home, and I needed something to break the monotony. I drove to a secluded spot I knew along the railway. The area had always been a popular location for freight trains to pass through. The tracks were surrounded by trees and dense foliage, offering the perfect cover for what I was about to do. I was eager to avoid the chance of being caught by law enforcement, especially now, after I'd been out of trouble for so long. I parked my car and made my way to the tracks, already thinking about the thrill of it all. Let me paint the scene for you. The tracks snaked through a thick forest for a while, entering a dark tunnel before emerging into a small clearing on the other side. Beyond that, there was a massive bridge that stretched over the water. Back when I was younger, my friends and I used to ride the train all the way across the bridge, but this time, I was alone. I didn't want to risk walking back 10 miles to my car if I missed the train, so my plan was simple. Hop on the train, ride it through the tunnel, hop off, and take a peaceful walk back. Simple, right? I waited for a few minutes, walking along the tracks, trying to shake off the strange feeling creeping over me. The sun was high in the sky, but the air had a strange, heavy quality to it, like something was about to happen. And then, it happened. I felt the vibration in the rails before I saw the train. It was coming. I darted to the side of the tracks and hid, keeping a safe distance. Freight train conductors rarely cared about people walking along the tracks, but I still didn't want to take any chances. The train rumbled past, and after a few cars had gone by, I came out of my hiding spot. It was a familiar dance now. Run alongside the train, grab the ladder, and swing up. It was almost second nature. The train wasn't going too fast, so I had plenty of time to climb. As I neared the tunnel, something caught my eye. A strange flash of light ahead. It was brief, almost like a spark from the train, but it was different. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a reflection from the rails or the train's headlights. There was something off about it. I tried to dismiss it, but a sinking feeling settled in my chest. Then, just as the train started to pick up speed, something happened. A hand, cold, bony, and strong, shot out of the darkness from the tunnel. It grabbed my leg. I nearly lost my grip, but I managed to hold on. Panic surged in me. I kicked and screamed, but the train kept moving, the darkness ahead swallowing everything. Before I could even process what had just happened, another hand slapped against my leg, pulling me closer to the tunnel's mouth. I screamed again, this time with more desperation, but I scrambled up the ladder as fast as I could. My heart raced, my breath quick and shallow. What the hell was that? I couldn't think. My mind was reeling. I had to get off the train. The adrenaline was pushing me forward, and I jumped off as the train exited the tunnel. My feet hit the ground with a thud, and I kept running, trying to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was after me. I took a moment to catch my breath as the train chugged over the bridge. The sound of the train's rumbling faded as I paced back and forth in the clearing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The tunnel had been dark, and those hands, they had felt so real, so alive. Who could have been in there? And why the hell would they try to drag me down? Then, it hit me. The only way back to my car was through that same tunnel. There was no way I was going to walk through it, not after what I had just experienced. The tunnel was pitch black, and I had no idea how many others could be hiding in there. But there was no choice. I couldn't stay here. The bridge was too long, and if a train came along, I'd be caught out in the open. My only option was to go back through the tunnel, but I was terrified. I grabbed a rock, my heart thudding in my chest, and started walking. Halfway into the tunnel, I heard it. A faint click, like the sound of someone clicking their tongue, but the sound was off, too mechanical, too hollow. It echoed off the walls, and I froze, straining to hear. My blood ran cold. I could feel the air grow thick with something I couldn't describe. I wasn't about to die here. I pulled out my phone, trembling in my hands, and bluffing through my fear, I shouted, "Stay back or I'll shoot!" My words bounced off the tunnel walls. There was a brief silence, and then the clicking stopped. I wasn't going to wait around to see if my bluff had worked. I quickly pulled up a gunshot sound effect from YouTube, cranked the volume, and let it blast through the tunnel. The echo was deafening, and I prayed the sound was enough to scare whoever, or whatever, was in there. Without thinking, I sprinted into the darkness, my legs pumping with fear and adrenaline. I didn't stop until I reached the other side of the tunnel, my chest heaving. I looked back once I was safely out of the tunnel. There, in the distance, was another flash of light, much deeper in the tunnel this time. But it wasn't just a flash. It was two figures standing motionless in the tracks, facing me. They didn't move. They didn't speak. And that was when I knew this was not over. I turned and sprinted away without looking back. But as I ran, the worst sound I had ever heard pierced the air. A screech, savage and inhuman, echoing from the tunnel behind me. It wasn't animal. It wasn't machine. It was something far worse. I don't think I'll ever be train hopping again. I'm a cosplayer, not extremely famous, but I'm known enough in my city that I get recognized from time to time. A while ago, I shared an experience where 3 men on a train tried to attack me. After that, I rarely take the train by myself anymore, but there are occasions when it's the most convenient option. I prefer to drive everywhere, but parking in my city is very expensive, and since I work as a freelance photographer, I can't always afford the steep parking fees. So, I take the train. My boyfriend had stayed at a friend's place the night before and was going to meet me on the other side of the city to take me to a photo shoot. I was dressed as Misa, but had a coat on over the outfit and regular shoes, so unless you looked closely, you couldn't tell I was cosplaying. It was 5:30 in the morning, and we were heading to another town for the shoot, so we had to leave early. The train was mostly filled with people either coming home from night shifts or early risers. I usually enjoy the quiet hours because people tend to leave me alone. But this time, a man boarded the train downtown and would be riding with me for 6 stops. Despite the many empty seats, he chose to sit directly across from me. "Hey," he said. I hadn't had coffee yet, and I wasn't in the mood for conversation, so I ignored him and kept scrolling through my phone. "Hey," he repeated, louder this time. I glanced up at him. "You're really pretty," he said. I didn't say anything, just nodded slightly to acknowledge I'd heard him. I get compliments like this often, especially when I've done my makeup for a shoot. "I said you're pretty. You look great," he repeated, this time with more irritation. "Yeah, I heard you. I'm pretty," I responded, not wanting to encourage the conversation further. "You're not that pretty," he grumbled. "Chicks like you need to learn a lesson." I've had this kind of attitude before, usually online. Some people don't like it when women are confident in their appearance. I rolled my eyes and went back to my phone. Only 4 stops left. I knew we'd be passing through a long tunnel soon, so I wasn't too worried. But then he said, "I'll cut that pretty face." I felt a knot in my stomach. The man's voice was getting louder now, and I noticed a few other passengers looking in our direction. 3 stops left. A few new people got on. When we passed through the tunnel, everything became quieter. The train was louder in the tunnel, and I didn't think anyone could hear what he was saying. When the train started approaching the last stop before mine, the man leaned toward me. "I'm going to hurt you if you get off this train," he said. I immediately felt a wave of nervousness. I was already on edge from my previous experience. I knew once I got off, I would have to walk to the mall to meet my boyfriend, and I was afraid the man might follow me. I decided to say something to stand my ground. "Fight me." I don't know why I said that. Maybe I wanted to sound brave, even though I knew the man was bigger and stronger than me. But in that moment, I was just trying to act tough. "I'll snap your neck," he snarled. We were passing through another tunnel now, and I could barely hear anything over the noise. The whole situation felt isolated, and I wasn't sure who else could hear us. The next stop came, and most of the people got off the train. Only me, the man, An older woman and a guy with headphones remained. I lied to him, trying to sound calm. My boyfriend is waiting for me at the station. I was scared, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to move too much because I was worried he might attack me. Then, to my surprise, I heard a voice. "You're the cosplayer, right?" It was the man with the headphones. I turned to look at him, not recognizing him, but he seemed to have noticed the tension and had heard the man's threats. He came over and sat next to me. "What are you doing up so early?" he asked casually, blocking the creepy guy's line of sight. I tried to sound nonchalant. "Just meeting some friends." The man with headphones then looked over at the guy across from us and gave him a pointed stare. When we reached the next stop, the man with headphones got off with me, and we walked together to the mall. My boyfriend had been waiting for me and saw us walking together. The creepy man followed us for a few blocks, but eventually he disappeared. Though I was still scared, the guy with the headphones stayed with us until my boyfriend arrived. We ended up giving him a ride home because his stop was further down the line. I don't know if that man would have really hurt me, but I'm thankful I didn't have to find out. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, and if you could survive only one of these stories, which one would it be? Also, drop "I made it" and mention our channel in the comments below. I want to know who my loyal followers are so I can give you a shout out in our next videos. And lastly, if you've experienced a terrifying encounter or have a horror story to share, send it to us on Reddit. And if you want to support the channel and help us create even more spine-chilling content, check out our Patreon or Ko-Fi. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to like and share the video, and now, stay tuned for our next horror episode.